Welcome to today's episode of the Group X podcast. I'm your host, Tony Zanardo, and if you haven't yet done so, hit that follow button so you never miss another episode. Today, I'll be talking to Lee Smith, trainer and presenter for Les Mills Asia Pacific. One word can sum up this episode: authenticity. Lee shares some insights into his time in the industry, from his first ever class to presenting on masterclass releases and everything in between. This episode's a long one, so grab your favourite beverage, sit back and enjoy the show. Lee, thank you so much for joining me on the show tonight, mate. I appreciate your time.
My absolute pleasure, and thank you for the invite.
No, mate, not a problem at all. You know you're going to be invited, that's for sure. Hey, tell us and tell the listeners how you got into the fitness industry. Where did it all begin for you?
Oh, mate, I was always an active kid, and I know I've probably shared the story a few times across training modules and other podcasts and chats, but I grew up with I have grown up with a health condition. I'm a haemophiliac. I'm a bleeder, a little Aussie bleeder.
Yeah.
I'm a mild haemophiliac. So essentially I only have to go and see a doctor when I do dumb shit, like hurt myself, you know?
Yeah.
So as a kid, I was always active. You know, I shouldn't have played body contact sports, but I played footy at school, you know, rugby league, rugby union, played cricket, was a really good cricketer. Got hit with a ball a couple of times, wasn't so good for me.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
Played a lot of indoor cricket.
Yep.
Was a little bit better.
Yep.
Did archery. I was actually very, very good at archery, which is probably an insight into me as someone who's very particular. And archery wasn't really a sport. It was more like a discipline.
Yep.
You know, it was a process. And I was as a kid, I was very good at it. I was sort of at a national level and had some records around the place in New South Wales that, hard to explain to people.
That's
it's
cool.
Hard to explain to people how the type of archery I did was scored and how what I did a few times was off the fucking hook. So
that's
I loved
unique,
it.
man.
I loved the sport.
That's very unique.
Yeah.
That's not something you hear of frequently. You don't hear that at all.
Yeah.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, it was very cool, but it's one of those. It was a discipline that was about repetition. It was about process. It was about, you know, A plus B will equal C. Like that's what archery was, because it was so repetitive.
Yes.
You know, and you had to be awesome at being able to repeat the action, the discipline, the mindset, the relaxation, the breathing was really cool. I really enjoyed it.
Please tell me there were no injuries with the haemophilia around.
No,
good.
No.
I'm just thinking arrows and sharp things and yeah.
No, never any issues with that. Never any issues with that. It was a very, very safe sport. It was a very safe sport at the time.
Yeah.
And so obviously cycling. You know, cycling for me was my thing, because being a bleeder, an issue with a lot of haemophiliacs is we end up with bleeds in joints, and especially obviously hips and knees. And I grew up in Sydney, obviously, and Royal Prince Alfred was our sort of base for haemophilia in the metro area. And I'd grown up with a lot of boys who had walking sticks and had issues with bleeds.
Wow.
And it was never going to be me. I was determined that was never going to be me. So they either, you know, I needed to do things to strengthen my body.
Yep.
And they wanted us to swim, and I sort of hate swimming, to be honest. Like, I don't even like sand between my toes and, you know, at the beach. So, although I love the beach, I'm happy to walk into the water up to my ankles, and I sort of go. And now living here in Perth, mate, I don't want to go in the water. There's sea lions in the water, you know. Like, But I didn't really like the idea of swimming. And I like the idea of riding. Cycling was good. I knew it'd make my legs strong and it'd make my knees strong. And that's sort of where that came from, I guess.
Yeah.
I fell off a few times, and being someone who raced and still races bikes, I'd fallen and had injuries. Scared the shit out of my mum a few times, you know. Ended up in hospital a couple of times, got hit by a couple of cars over my life, broken a couple of bones in races. But overwhelmingly, the cycling for me became my fitness. It became my fitness, you know. It became my jam. So and then bringing it into the gym happened. I'd lived overseas for a while. I'd come back to Australia to sort of restart life. And walked into a job at Aquafit out at Campbelltown.
Oh wow! Is that where you started? That was your first.
That's where I started, mate. I started at Aquafit. Yeah, I started at Aquafit. It hadn't been open very long, and obviously the whole Catholic club out there, and that was a big gym. If you remember back in the day when it opened, it was a 3,500 member gym, and I was just on the gym floor, and I had some strength and conditioning stuff I'd previously done, and I'd sort of fired that back up, and I went and did a weightlifting cert, just a level 1 weightlifting cert, because I was, just wanted to be in the gym and get back and get strong and ride my bike again back in Australia, because I'd raced overseas, just in Canada where I was, just at a club level. It was just for me. So that's how that started. I ended up in the cycle studio pretty much because we had an opportunity for a training, and that was going to be at that venue, and it was there were 2 of us who were trained for sort of 50% of the cost. You know how they give the one spot for free? Well, they did 2 for 50% of the cost. And
brilliant.
It was great. Yeah, it was great. RPM 31 I learnt on. In that transition into group fitness from that, from that gym floor fitness and PT fitness and my own cycling fitness. The transition into group fitness happened RPM 31, and I remember.
So was training was at
it was at Aquafit. It was at Aquafit.
Who was your trainer? Who did you join?
Michelle Bridges.
Oh, okay, cool.
And Jacko was like an intern trainer.
Trainee.
He was a young trainer on the team, learning how to facilitate modules. And I know I said this to Adam Rigby last year, and I had a chat with Adam on his podcast. You might remember, but it was that thing about Jacko. It's the same for everyone. Jacko was my trainer. He was my trainer in my first program, and everyone remembers their first trainer in their first program. It's a really big friggin' deal. So
I'll have a shout out to Pete Manuel here. Pete was my IMT, initial training module coach, and but he just it's one of those things you go, you know what? I think forever you're always going to remember that moment and that person that helped you understand what this new universe was that you just walked into.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what, Pete for me I was introduced to Pete by Carol Newton.
Yes.
Who's a combatant, now lives in Queensland. At the time, she was the Park Street GFM.
Yes. Yeah.
But FF.
Yep.
And she introduced me a year in. I'd already got work in the city. I applied for a job at FF at the new Market Street.
Yes.
Where Amanda Breen was the GFM.
Yep.
And I got a pretty firm no, actually, AB. I got a pretty firm no. And I ended up having a call with Holly Derbyshire at King's Cross.
Yes. Yep.
And Holly was like, that'd be, I'd like to see you coming. Are you willing to come in and, audition? I'm like, yeah, of course. And Karen from Randwick came in as the cycle expert with Holly, I guess. And I rolled a couple of tracks out. I can't, during the week after lunch or something it was,
Yep.
And the feedback was really good, and I was really humbling to get the good feedback. And it sort of started from there. So I ended up on the timetable at King's Cross was my club. It was my home club. I reckon at the time I was the only straight male cycle instructor in Sydney, which I always thought was pretty funny, and I loved it. I loved it. The fact that KK was K Cross was also my home club. It was it was a great club. And I was there from the transition from Holly through to Stephen as well. So that was really cool. My time in Sydney was really cool, and I eventually ended up in Market Street. I took over from Pete's classes, his Monday class. He had a Monday 12:30 class, and it was absolutely out the door. And his role was to help get the club going, especially that indoor cycle space. And I was privileged and lucky enough to take over that space and just grow it from there. So,
excellent.
And I did a lot of classes. I was Monday lunch at Market Street ended up being a double. It got so popular we had another class. So it was Monday a double. Monday night I was doing. Where was I doing Monday night? I can't even remember. There was another double on a Monday night. Tuesday morning I ended up at Bondi Platinum. With Pete. It was like a 9:30, 10:30 class, and then Tuesday night was one class at Rockdale.
Oh, wow.
Wednesday morning was a lunch, or Wednesday was a lunch that started at 11:30 at Bond Street.
Yes. Yeah.
And Wednesday night was a double at Park Street.
Wow.
At which I'd had a rebirthed George Tonga as a participant.
Yep.
Used to come on a Wednesday night before he sort of got back into the role and into the trainer team here in Aussie. Thursday morning I had something somewhere, and then Friday, for a period of time on a Friday, I had a 4:30. I had a GFM named Tony.
Must have been a top bloke, I reckon.
Yeah, he's pretty good. He let me do whatever I wanted. I remember that.
It was a Friday afternoon at Pitt Street, wasn't it?
I just remember we turned that class. It was like 4:30 or something on a Friday.
Yeah.
And I remember we started, and there was basically, a handful of people in the class, and within a couple of months, it was absolutely out the door on a Friday.
Yeah.
And I just vividly remember one day going, why are you people here?
Yeah.
Like, why are you here? It's Friday afternoon in Sydney.
In the city. Yeah.
You should be at the pub.
Yes.
And I should be with you. That sort of thing.
But they'd all go to the pub afterwards, though, wouldn't they?
Yeah, probably, mate. Probably. But I think it was. I think what it did is it was. I loved that opportunity. Like, for me, that was part of the. There's so many things to talk about off the back of that. The reason I did so many classes was because I got help from Pete.
Yep.
Carol saw something in me and believed in my passion.
Yeah.
I'd only been teaching for a year, and I was already in the city in Fitness First. I was trying to make a name for myself, and I could see a pathway to something.
Yep.
And I worked my ass off. I would come from Southwest Sydney out near Aquafit where I lived to come in and do these classes, and I'd do 2 classes, stay in the city, go and sleep in the park.
Yep.
Eat some food, and then go and do the nighttime classes, and then go home.
Yep.
Like, I was that dedicated,
This is the Group X podcast. I want to have a quick chat in relation to your initial module training, if I can. I want to cast your mind back to initial module training, walking in there on that first day. Tell us what was going through your head and what happened in that experience for you, if you can remember.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what I was thinking. I would have been excited. I just would have been excited because I'd committed to something. And if I put energy into something, I'd like to think that I go, okay, cool, I'm in. I might not jump both feet in, but I'll step both feet in.
Yep.
So I was prepared to get uncomfortable, which didn't really sort of bother me. But I do remember, I do remember a couple of things. Number one, it was, I was a cyclist.
Yep.
I was a bike rider. Nothing going to happen that was going to fucking bother me.
Yep.
Nothing was going to worry me.
Yep.
Nothing was going to be too much for me. And like most PTs, you think you can coach the world.
Yes. Yes.
If only they'll listen to me, they'd all be amazing.
Yep.
If
Yep.
only they'd listen to my advice. So there's a bit of that. I think I didn't really like the vibe of Michelle at the start.
Yep.
And that was me probably being vulnerable and a little worried.
Yep.
Maybe.
Yep.
I wasn't really sure about the vibe I was getting from her at the time. But I got to tell you, after we did the masterclass and we sat down, and I'm sure it was a full module. Like, I just remember there were 16, maybe even 20 people.
Yep.
And normally in my time, they were sort of capped at about 16,
Yep.
But I just remember it was really busy. And by the time the masterclass had finished and we'd sat down, she knew everyone's name.
Yep.
And said everyone's name out loud. And I just remember going, that is so impressive.
Yeah.
That is so impressive. Because I'm hopeless with names today.
Yep.
After 15 years of teaching classes, I was still shit at remembering names. And I even remember Jacko being great at it, and Jacko saying, as a school teacher, he sees a person and a name sort of goes on an imaginary page in his brain.
Yep.
The next time he sees that person, the name pops off.
Yeah.
I remember him explaining that to me at a later date.
Yep.
And I was like, you bastard, mate, team, crew, gang, peeps. You over there, hey, in the red.
I remember the first time I met Michelle Bridges was at a quarterly workshop that was done at Bondi Platinum. And I walked into the room, and I can't remember who I sat next to, but I'm going to say it was probably the first quarterly that I'd been to after initial module training. Yeah, walked in, and I'd seen her, and I had no idea who the hell she was, and this gorgeous lady come walking towards me, and and introduced herself to me and said, "Oh, what's your name?" And I was like, "Oh, wow, I'm Tony." She's, "Oh, hi, I'm Michelle." And she did that to every single person that walked in that room that day. And I'd never seen that done before by anybody. And that stuck with me forevermore. It was like, okay, you know what, Tony? Sometimes if you'll get to class earlier than other people, as you normally do, I was always the first one to class. Well, someone sometimes stood near the back door, near the door, the entrance to the room, and said good day to people as they walked in. And it made a difference to the whole environment. The energy in the room was, I had connected with them before we'd even started the ride.
Right.
And that was just something that I remember taking away. Even in Canberra on those bloody freezing cold mornings at SISAC, at 5:45 in the morning in the middle of bloody winter, if I got in there before most of them and stood close to the door once I'd actually got my stuff together and said good morning, the energy would just lift, especially freezing cold at 5:45. But there's something I always remember from Mish, from her.
That's interesting.
With that. Yeah.
Well, I do remember, and I know I've mentioned it to quite a few people, including Jacko himself. Again, Jacko was my trainer, that sort of always resonates with me. But there was a time where I was pushing back a bit during the module and questioning a lot of stuff. Imagine me questioning things, and he basically came over and he said, "Listen, Rockstar, just do what we asked you for now. And once you're certified, you can go out there and change the world." Like, I probably took that literally and went, "Well, fuck it, I will then." I will, or that was my plan all along. Why do you mean? It's just, so that's always a story I do enjoy sharing. I do enjoy sharing because it brings back those memories and those good fuzzy feelings to me about where the journey began.
Where it started.
Yeah. And your first initial module training is a really big deal. Your first program, and I'll put it in that Les Mills context, but we can broaden it, of course.
Yeah.
The first training you do that will eventually see you on stage with a microphone for the first time, solo is a huge moment in your life, and then it's about what you do after that.
Yeah. To understand that whole concept of, guys, this is what we do and this is how we do it. And for someone to teach you that skill set, it still blows my mind how much, for me anyway, how much it changed my life from being the fat dude that was working for a telecommunications company, to walking into a room and going, "Wow, this is amazing. I love this," to having that opportunity to do it. And then someone teaching the skill set that was so foreign to, okay, there's music that goes with this on this piece of paper and we follow it along and this is how you understand it. And, back then it was the old VHS and the I think CDs had just turned over to CDs. It wasn't cassettes
that's
anymore.
Before my time, bro. I never had the video thing.
Shut up. And actually, hang on, you're older than me too. So, hey,
I was a late bloomer.
But no, just going through that whole process is just, I think, is amazing because it changes you as a person. But when you realize that how you can impact people from doing what we do, that just blows my mind and is huge. It makes me just go,
Agree.
You know what?
Agree.
Yeah, it's powerful. Powerful stuff.
Again, Pete for me was someone who said, he goes, "You never know who's in the room and their reason for being in it." Yeah. As simple as that.
Yeah.
Gym equipment, gym clothing is the great leveler.
Yep. Yeah.
Completely. It just is the great leveler of a room. You have no idea who's in your room and their reason for being in there. And I think that always led me to go, just led me to go, I don't really care what you do while you're in here, as long as you're not getting in the way.
Yep.
Just you're here and there's a bum on a seat and it's a number on my number sheet.
Yep.
And if you're engaging with me today, that's awesome. If you're not, there's probably a reason I'm not getting in your way.
Yes. Yep. I'm not going to call you out because when we've all stood up, you have sat down. Even if you're in the front row, cool. You know what? You're here. This is your 45, 50 minutes of you time. As long as what you're doing is safe, I'm ticking this to go, it's okay. Yep. You might be annoying the people around you, but I'm not going to stop a class and get the shits because you're not listening to what I'm saying. I'm not that important.
Exactly right.
I'm here as that person that's coaching you along this journey here. And there's many reasons why people.
It's many reasons, mate. Yeah. Exactly. And I think sometimes there was a post on Facey only a couple of weeks ago about it. Someone talking about people in their class not following along. And I sort of chimed in, which I don't do very often, and went, who really gives a shit, mate? 90% of the people are probably doing pretty much what you're saying.
Yes.
Just be thankful there's a bum on a seat.
Yeah.
And get on with it.
Don't let your energy fuck up because one person out of 40 or 50 or however many are in front of you is doing the wrong thing. Those other 40 or 50 people are there because they need you to help them through whatever they're going through right now. They need your energy. Don't allow you to switch that focus and focus on the 1%er that's doing the wrong thing. No. Let that one person go. Just let them do their thing.
Exactly right. Let them do their thing. Who knows why they're in the room on the day? You know, and it's not really our place to ask, unless you have a relationship at a certain level with someone. You know, which for me I was never big on. Like I was always. I'm naturally quite an introvert. I re-energize generally solo or with wifey. You know, for me to be on stage, it was never about me. I was never worried whether or not people would have a good time. I was more concerned with them being safe. Just make sure everyone's okay. You know, the safe, boring, effective workout part. Because and the reason I say that with a little bit of tongue in cheek is because I had confidence that all the other stuff I'm going to do is going to get you to where you want to go. Let's have some fun and ride. And I went through a time where I was super techie and it was all about the education and the physicality and the coaching language and doing all the things perfectly. And it's amazing how over a journey it ends up just going, hey, how you going? Find a bit of gear, let's go. You know, that's the sort of mindset. It was never that blasé, but it was not about the detail in that way. It was the journey and have fun and do it together, and to a degree let everything sort itself out in 45 minutes. You know. And it's so simplified to say that, because as a writer, as a technician, as a coach, as someone who had the privilege to work at a really good level within Les Mills and that place, for me to dive down into the way that my brain worked when I was on stage and how I prepared to do that stuff would excite as many people as bore the shit out of as many. You know. In all honesty, you know, and I never really dived down into that too much in conversation. I'm saying that like that because it's not something that I ever dive down into too much at all. So
this is the Group X podcast. Hey, what tracks did you get in your initial module training? Can you remember what
track 6? Track 6.
Just the one track?
6. Just the one track. It was just the one track. Up EM31 track 6, and don't even ask me what it was called. I have to look it up. Which is pretty funny. I think because I think that's the first time I've been asked that question. Probably ever, and not been able to say what was the song. I just remember it was a 6. I remember it was cool.
Wasn't Shivers, was it?
No, that was a little bit earlier, mate. That was a little bit earlier.
There I am showing my age then, showing what I learned on 23, and and had Faster Harder Scooter track 5, and Jesus, that's all I can say to that one. Jesus.
I will find it. Underwater.
Okay.
I think it was Underwater. Delirium. Underwater. I think might have been it.
Delirium.
Yeah. I think that might have been it. Just wow, that's bizarre to forget. Getting old, see. Dementia's kicking
in. Yeah, sure. Yeah, dementia. Yeah, good. How old are you now? Jesus Christ.
Oh, mate, just. That's hilarious. That is hilarious.
No, I had it was Faster Harder Scooter, and I passed to Shadow, and my mentor was the lovely Shannon Cleary, and Shannon would not let me move away from that track until I got it, and I appreciate that so much now. Now, 19 years later, now. But back then, boy, did I hate her guts, because every time that I got on the bike next to her, and I'm pretty sure it was 2 times a week, that was the only track I was allowed to do until she had said, yeah, you nailed that. And not so much nailed the Corrie, but it was nailing everything. The layers, the what I was saying when I was saying, the timing, the whole connecting, the whole getting it right. And I appreciate it so much because she was relentless in that and going, Tony, no, next week we're doing something. I'm like, fuck. I even had people in the class going, Oh, Christ, Tony, no. Not faster, harder scooter again, please.
Yeah.
I tell you that it took me about 3 years before I played it again after I'd moved off that release to something else, because I was like, oh no. You know, because it was all foreign to me back then. I'd come from telco and IT background. There was no chance. All this Screw Fitness stuff was what? You know, and getting it right, and it just didn't come naturally at first. It took, I'm going to say, good 6 to 8 months before I finally got it. I think for me, most of it was actually being in front of someone, being in front of a group of people, because I'd never done public speaking before. I'd never been in front of more than 2 or 3 people in a meeting, having a chat to a couple of other people, not in a room that had Shannon Cleary following of 42 bikes in a room and 72 people rock up. That was that whole, oh crap, she shared the stage with me, and she took me under her wing and was like, yeah, come on, let's do this. And it's
we were lucky. I mean, that whole period in Sydney too was pretty lucky. I can imagine from the mid-20s of RPM right through to, the mid-40s, there was probably that 5 years right through Sydney there where, Pete was GFM at Bondi Platinum, and Yvette was the national GFM, Pete's wife, Yvette's husband. McSweeney, God himself, was teaching at Platinum. Just about every GFM in Sydney was probably a presenter, an LM presenter.
Yeah, well, there was so, and from a lot of them were at North Sydney, and then when King's Cross opened, Chris went over there as well, and there was a whole group of them that moved into the city, and because a lot of them were teaching at North Sydney, because North Sydney was one of the newer clubs that had opened up before fitness first grew as rapidly as they did and opened up so many clubs quickly. And then that's when most of the trainer team back then all went, oh, cool, we've got our own clubs, let's go. And so everyone went back over the bridge, and not many people stayed at North Sydney.
I've just realised a mistake that I made, mate. I've just realised a massive mistake that I made, which again proves that the dementia is kicking in. It wasn't King's Cross that was my home club. It was Darlinghurst.
Now, that makes complete sense around what you were saying before. Even though King's Cross is still there, Darlinghurst, yes. Wow. So Steve Parker.
Yes. Yeah. So I was there from when Holly left and Steve came in.
Steve came in, Wow.
Yeah. And he was such a great support. He was such an amazing support. But I've completely messed up
I've just gone completely mind blank. Where was the cycle studio? Oh, next to the group fitness room on that corridor.
Yeah. They had the big swinging doors. Had swinging doors through.
Yeah.
It was an okay studio, actually. It was a pretty good studio. And Stephen was such a wonderful support. I think I got New South Wales Instructor of the Year, and he came in and presented me the pen, and
love it.
At the end of a lunch class, and it was very cool. He was always a wonderful support, though. Always. Always. But it was wow. I mean, Sydney was just such a hot place to teach. Group fitness. There was a real period there where, not that instructors were just not just that instructors were probably falling from the trees, but that there was just so much quality in Sydney. And I say that in retrospect. Some of that's in retrospect.
I think
knowing from later on.
A lot of us travelled from club to club as well. When you were on the books with Fitness First, you virtually would travel anywhere. If someone needed the cover, you'd go. You'd go to help out, but you'd also you had your ear to the ground for if a permanent class came up somewhere that worked and was able to fit in with your schedule, or you were able to move one class to pick up another one or maybe another two, then you did it. But there was never an issue. It was like there was always enough instructors around to cater, but also there was also enough classes around for everybody as well. There was not a shortage either way. It was always, you could always, if you were giving up a class, you knew there was another 1 or 2 people that were ready to take that one from you for whatever reason. And it worked well back then.
Yeah, for me, I loved the double. I loved the back-to-back. It was just the way to teach in Sydney for me. It worked. It allowed me to make, not because it wasn't full-time. It wasn't full-time. I had another job, and it was only it was only a couple of years later that Body Bike started. So there was a business happening as well as teaching. So
no, I never did a double. I was always just one class, because I always had PT, around what I was doing with classes, and
Yes.
It was interesting though. I remember, side note for a second, I remember chatting to some of the PTs in North Sydney and even at Bond Street. They were like, mate, what are you teaching group fitness classes for? And I'm like, because that's where I pick up my PT clients. I'm sick of doing these triple packs that we've got to do as, part of your role and building up your client base and all that kind of stuff. I was sick of giving away my free time. But if I was in a class and I happened to mention that I was also doing PT, then they enjoyed my class. They enjoyed doing PT with me as well and got the benefit of both. And that was, I think a lot of the PTs didn't jump on board with it. And I still wonder why PTs don't do some form of group fitness classes, because it's the easiest way.
And I don't think group fitness providers do a very good job of explaining the possibility to a PT.
Yeah. Well, look,
They don't.
100% true on that. I agree with that. And I think that's the if you cast your mind back to when you first started teaching group fitness classes, if you remember listening to the radio, there was so much push around become a personal trainer, get in there, X amount of dollars for this course, give you X amount of time and you can get out there and be a personal trainer. And the PT course never really spoke around the group fitness side of things, but also when you did your initial training module, none of that was ever spoken to around PT as well. So it's like they never two streams or two verticals in the industry, but never communicated to each other properly.
Crossover was you had to stumble across it or work it out yourself.
Yeah. I started at the gym before I went into a group fitness class. So in my head, it was around weight training and doing all that kind of stuff until my mate who was training with, David Hawkins from Bondi, said to me, Tone, why don't we try this class out? Sure, let's go do this. My first ever cycle class was with an instructor in Sydney called Pune, and it was at Bondi The Edge, the old Bondi class. Now, it was a freestyle cycle. It was no, it wasn't a pre-choreographed class at all. It wasn't Les Mills or anything. And the music was fantastic, and that's what captivated me. I was in this dark room. The music was thumping. It was loud. I was on this bike, and I was sweating my hole off, but I could sing, and no one gave a shit. This is heaven. I'm having an absolute ball in here. And the only reason I ended up leaving that class is because the pedal strap smashed, the pedal strap broke, and I gashed my calf muscle really, really badly. So I had to hobble out halfway through that class. That was my first introduction to a group fitness class. But I went back because I was like, this hello. But that was I'm going to say that was probably a good 2 years before I even did my instructor training or anything like that. It was because I was living in Bondi and it was like, cool, let's have a bit of fun with this. But man.
Very cool.
Those days.
Very cool.
Anyway, off topic. That was about me, not you. Shut up, Tony.
That's all right. That's all good. It's all stories.
This is the Group X podcast. Let's get back on you. You started at Aquafit. You did your training. You then met the lovely Carol, who introduced you to Mr. Manuel, Pete, and you're obviously you picked up a couple of classes at Bondi. Yep.
I did, and he would mentor me though.
Yep.
He mentored me, so I'd go in and teach one of his classes for free.
Yeah.
Then we'd go and have a coffee, and he'd give me feedback.
Yep. I want to ask you a quick question though, because I think there's some people out there that might not have ever had the opportunity to work at a platinum club like Fitness First Bondi. Yep. Can you, in your mind, compare that to Aquafit? Now, I'm not saying that Aquafit is not a premium club, but there's a difference on members that go to those different clubs. There's a different type of member. There's the people that are from the eastern suburbs, as we know, they are a different kettle of fish, and you've got the people that are in Campbelltown that are different again. Yep. Is there a way you could describe the class that you would have taught at Aquafit compared to the class you would have taught at Bondi, and how you would have taught it?
Question. It's a good question. Aquafit was very much a community. Well, all gyms are community based, but Aquafit had a community which, in a broad sense, was quite similar.
Yep.
People who came into the cycle studio were just, we were just sort of all the same people after the same thing. Come in and listen to some cool music, get coached along and motivated.
Yep.
and the goals or the noise that was made or the words that were spoken, nothing was really OTT. You might have had a member who had a big personality, but that was about it. Everyone probably had one member who had a big personality who made a bit of noise, and that might fire up some others.
Yep.
Platinum, number one, because of the gym and because of the population, the density of population. I can remember doing Saturday morning classes and coming up the escalator before classes open, and there's 200 people out the front of the gym, and in your head you go, well, there's 60 bars and 40 bikes.
Yep.
So unless there's 100 on the gym floor, there's going to be an argument.
Yep.
That was the quick math that I would do in my nerdy head, and you'd sort of slide through the sliding doors and go in, and it was out the door. It was just absolutely out the door, and it was so different. It was so diverse. There was just different types of community, different types of professionals. Yep. People from different parts of the world that were obvious. Yes. Together, yes. An area where the South Africans would sit,
yes.
And
yep.
we had movie stars and TV personalities in the classes,
yep.
And their PTs or their husbands or staff.
Yep.
The CEO of Fitness First himself would be in the yep. classes every
yep.
now and then.
Yep. I remember
this is where it happened because head office was just down the road. And
yeah.
I appreciated and always had really good awareness around wherever I was at any given time and how to teach to the crowds. I loved the energy of Fitness First because it was always like it was on the edge of losing control.
Yep.
Because there
yep.
were big personalities in the room and there were clashes in the room, and there was
yes.
always someone having an argument with someone in
yeah.
Bondi.
Yep.
I remember it got to the point where we had to have a number system to get in and tags, and
yep.
there was a fist fight out the front one morning when I showed up, and
yep.
I remember standing on the stage and going, you know what, peeps, I come a long way to work here. I don't need this shit. I'm not a security guard.
Yep.
You guys can sort it out, and if we can't sort it out, I'll go and teach somewhere else. Yeah. And I remember how quiet the room went when I started the class.
Yep.
Because they were all, and that was just me being honest and authentic. And it only took one person, the beautiful Sunny, to make a little bit of woo, and that was it.
And that was
Everyone was off.
Everyone
was off. And we were back to
love
sort of thing. So
yeah,
I loved all the clubs and all the classes. Bond Street, Wednesday morning, 11:30 and 12:15 at Bond Street, with not 1 second between two classes.
Yeah,
with 55 bikes back to back, and always a bike broken every week.
Yeah,
and just honestly, you would get there. I would roll up at 11 o'clock, half an hour before the class, and there's already 45 bikes taken with towels or bottles or something on it. And then there's always people walking in looking for a bike in track one. Yeah. And then that class finishes, and it's to try and manage 55 people leaving and 155 wanting to come in.
Yeah.
Was always a challenge.
Yeah.
It was always a struggle.
I did a Thursday.
Struggle.
I did a Thursday morning there at 11:30, and it was just I just remember that trying to.
Chaos.
You were okay if you had the 11:30 because your guys could get in. Yeah, it was the 12:15 that was the absolute. Are you kidding me?
Yep.
Yeah, they'd get the shits. The instructor would get the shits. Like, I'm meant to be starting now. It's like, I really don't give a shit. My class finished. It's it's actually a 49-minute class, but how the hell you put it into 45 minutes is, righto. Yeah. I'm not going to allow you and your members to walk in while I still haven't finished. Like, guys, come on. That was, I think that was poor programming on the group fitness timetable on the group fitness manager that was there at that time. Yeah. But I think I understand now, there needs to be a 5-minute gap between. No, you need to air the room for Christ's sake. Come on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But no, it's...
And 45, RPM was a 45-minute program, then it went to a 50-minute program, and didn't matter which one it was always in between anyway.
Yes. So, yeah. And then that was when I remember most of it, no one had ever hung around for track 9 anyway. No one was ever doing stretching. It was just a ride home, and cool, get off, do a little bit. See ya. You're out. It's like,
and Bond Street was just so corporate. Like, it was such a corporate gym. Everyone came downstairs, and it was just... They didn't have
time to hang around
Simon
either.
Poitevin, I remember, former rugby union Wallaby sitting in the corner, Simon Poitevin over there, it was unreal.
Yeah. But that was, even that club as well, I remember, is so different because they didn't hang around to chat, members. No. It was corporate. They got an hour for lunch. That means if you're 45-minute class, they've got 7.5 minutes before and 7.5 minutes after. Really, okay, let's make it. There's 5 minutes before to get to class, so I'm going to push that. I'm going to have maybe 10 minutes to have a shower, get changed, grab my lunch, get back to my desk. Dude,
No, it was awesome. It was awesome.
Yeah.
It was really, every gym was quite unique. Every gym was unique, and
Yes.
therefore every class was unique. The way you taught, I would probably teach, if I did 4 classes in a day, my 1 and 2 would be the same as my 3 and 4.
Yep.
I'd do a mix and then another mix,
Yep.
and then go and do them again that night, because it's completely different people. But the way you teach them is completely different.
Yes.
Depending on who was in front of you, and whether I was tired, whether I was wet, whether I was cold, what they were doing.
Yep.
The energy I brought into the room, the energy they brought into the room.
Yeah.
There's so many things that influence a class, as you said. And I think I learned a lot about how to establish an energy in a room.
Yep.
Doing that many classes in Sydney, I really did have that. I did really have that awakening where I could realize I could walk into a room and establish an energy on purpose.
Yes.
Rather than as a result of me being tired and not saying much and walking in and realizing eventually that the room went quiet because they could sense that I had the shits, essentially.
Yep.
I realized that I could put it on.
Yep.
I could set up a bike and not make eye contact and everyone go quiet. And depending on the song you put on as you get ready, was it an upbeat song or was it a heavy song? It was you start to learn that to create an energy in a room in which to start a class. And sometimes it was absolutely honest and authentic that's how I feel on the day.
Yep.
And it might have been bouncing off the stage, let's get this party started.
Yeah.
Or it might have been mellow and slow and me going, I need you guys today.
Yep.
Like it was about me for track 1 just to get into it for them.
Yeah. Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where you do. I know for me, it was something I learned to be was accept that vulnerability and use it as a tool. I worked really hard as an instructor to go, what is it that I'm doing, that I'm thinking, that I'm feeling, and how do I use that? Not to coach a better layer 1. How do I use it to enhance the whole thing?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah.
So how did the opportunity come up for you to become a presenter and trainer? Where did that?
It's a good question. I guess I saw. Yeah, it's a really good question, and I guess I made a decision quite early. Like once I was in it for a year, and I was in Sydney, and I started teaching, and I knew what presenters were. And I've told this as well previously, but it's always fucking funny, and it should make Alani laugh. Is that the very first workshop I ever did was out at Aquafit. It turned out that they were going to be at Aquafit. And I remember he was late getting there by hours, and I think you'd swear he'd come from Melbourne. It was hilarious, but it was a really good class. I remember having a lot of fun. I remember Alani Storm just has such an incredible presence.
Yeah. Yep.
He's got the presence and he's got voice and he had language and he had feel. And again, I say that in retrospect, but they're probably not the words I would have used on the day. And on the day I would have gone, he was really cool.
Yep.
It would have been that. And for no particular reason. So it was an insight into the energy of group fitness and how different it was to anything else in my life, how different it was to anything else I was doing. And I always loved music. I was high school radio, I had music in my veins from a young age.
Yep.
I was always making mixtapes and copying songs off Triple M in Sydney, you know?
Yep.
What else were you doing when you were 10?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was always in me, but I really loved it. And then the flip side of that is my first Filex, which I think was, which would have been 30, probably 35, 35, RPM 35.
Yep.
Was downstairs in the old exhibition centre, and Dan McDonough was there, Meg was there. I remember that they were on different bikes on stage, and the bikes that were out the front that we were sitting on were dog shit. They were just terrible. They were absolutely terrible. And the one I got on didn't have a clip on one side because I got in there, I guess, late-ish and had a bike, what was left. There was only a few in the back row or the second back row.
Yep.
And I was so disappointed. I was so disappointed in how that felt a year in that I basically sent emails to everybody and went, that was a really shit experience for me. That was really, the bikes were garbage. Like they were so bad. That I actually got off during the class and walked out of the room because the resistance was essentially permanently on and one pedal didn't work. Yeah. And I wasn't the only one in the room having issues. I remember, so I wasn't daunted by it. I think I actually went outside and rung a guy named Paul Hilberg and said, you need to come into this and have a look at what's not available for this shit where there's 60 people hanging out a door for this dude from Canada who apparently lives in New Zealand. Yeah. It was a bit of that sort of stuff. So that started something else. But
All those bikes were wheeled in from clubs around Sydney. That's where they came.
Sure they were.
They were from Fitness First clubs that were brought in for those events. Because I remember there was a couple of times where North Sydney bikes disappeared on a Friday afternoon. I'm like, what's going on? Oh, okay, they're being used. You know, there's a truck outside in the laneway, and that's what we're doing. They were being picked up and taken into Filex, and then they'd be brought back at late Sunday afternoon, and yeah.
Well, back then the Les Mills website had a forum you could get on.
Yes.
Had an open forum, and Dan McDonough would get on there, and some of the team and others would get on there, and so there was a bit of a reply to what I said, and that was cool. I ended up with a personal email from someone, you know, basically apologizing for it, and it was sort of whatever with all of it, I guess, but it did fire me up enough to go, I'd like to do that. I'd like to do that. I probably saw things that I really enjoyed, and I probably heard things where I went, I can do that.
Yes.
You know? And it was a year later. It wasn't even a year later. It was probably 6 months later. Back at Aquafit again. Meg Nuttall was taking an RPM module. And Kylie Gates was there as well. So whether it was some sort of assessment or a sign off, and again, I say that in retrospect, but I knew she was going to be there because a girlfriend at the time was doing the module. So I knew it was happening. I knew it was happening. So I'd recorded a class on a DVD and took it down there and met them on the Sunday afternoon and said, my name's Lee Smith. I'm an RPMer. I've been doing it since 31. And they knew, and Meg knew who I was actually because she'd replied to me in an email about Sydney, about the
bikes.
About that. So there was at least that understanding of where I was coming from. And I just said to her, I remember saying to her, I just said, look, I feel like I'm pretty good at this. I'd love the opportunity for some feedback. And my want is to sort of take it further and, you know, do what you guys do. So it was a simple thing like that. And I was prepared for whatever. In all honesty, for whatever. And a few weeks later, I'd got a call and an email, it started. I guess it started, and by 39, by the next Filex, which was only about 6 months later, I was on stage shadowing. And that same time, actually, one Mr. Matty Clark had to pull out of doing a lecture at Filex. And got in contact, and we connected at that time. He got in contact and asked me if I wanted the spot, and I created a module.
Oh, wow.
It was a technical setup thing around cycling and how to apply it. It was super nerdy and bike nerdy, to be honest.
How did I not know this?
It was. We'd met at workshops, and he was really young, and we just known and obviously connected at that technical level. At that technical side, and that opportunity came up. And what was funny is I did the lecture because I was also. We'd had Body Bike going by then. I supplied 6 bikes for stage, but we had V bikes or something on the floor, which was great because the old V bike were awesome. I remember Sarah was over and not on stage. She was riding in the crowd, and Dano was there, and and that was my first Filex. And we were across the road at Market Street, and I walked into the practice, and here's these, the Les Mills people who you're starting to look up as gods by that time. You know, you're starting your journey, and it doesn't really matter what age. And they were similar. You know, Dan's the same age as me. Glenn's only a couple of years older. You know, but you're still looking up at them all, let alone the other presenters in the room like Jacko, my trainer. You know, this all comes around. It all resonates, doesn't it? But when I did my lecture, I had Vanessa Jodar from LMI in the room. Glenn was in the room. Sarah was in the room. There was it might have even been Emma Barry was in the room. They were quite, because she was people and culture for LMI. And I remember that they took a page that I had printed up for everyone to take. I remember Vanessa took one of those pages, and I'm going to say this with a gap. You can choose to put this in or not. In an RPM module, in an RPM manual that showed up a few years later that I saw, some of my content was in that book.
Love that.
I was never asked. I was never asked.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was never asked. Some of my content was in the training manual.
Oh, okay.
So what I could say is, so I was thankful, but at the same time, with a business head, went, motherfuckers.
How dare? How very dare?
So anyway, so 39 was first Filex. And my first training was done in Canberra. With Meg and Gatesy.
And when was that? Can you remember what year that was?
Where it was.
Yeah, you can't remember what
I think
year.
it might have been. No, I'm pretty sure it was Fitness First Deacon.
First Deacon, yep.
I'm pretty sure it was Fitness First Deacon, yeah. Yep. And I really enjoyed it. I had some work to do. I was cleared, but I had work to do, and that was all fine. I remember the masterclass was great, and the feedback was really good. Gatesy was really good. Actually, one thing, Kylie Gates, and there's so many little moments in my career where I refer to Gatesy, not always because of a personal chat, sometimes because of things that you read or that she'd said generically or to a group.
Yes.
But I remember she said to me with a module, she goes, "Your head's caught up in the module book." She said, "I can see that you're not that you want to repeat the book, but your head is so into the book." She goes, "With what you know about this," and again, thinking about it, what she meant was, I know how to ride the bike. I know how to coach really well at a basic level. That was all obviously a skill really quickly.
Yep.
And I could get across the cycling stuff really easily. That was intrinsic. She just said, look at the outcome at the start of each section and just focus on getting that outcome. Don't worry about what's in the manual.
Yep.
You're going to be doing this a little bit differently to others.
Yep.
And it was like permission.
Yeah.
It was absolute giving me permission to go, you've got to follow the bouncing ball.
Yeah.
But you don't have to say it verbatim.
Yes.
There are key things that you've got to address, but do it your way.
Yep.
And it was like, the first light bulb in my Les Mills life was being permission to be me and do it my way, because that's me. You know that. That's me. Yep. I got to do shit my way in order to get the message across.
Yes.
And that was perfect. That was really cool. Really cool. It was also the first place Deacon was also the first place I did my first quarterly as well.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Deacon Fitness First was where I did my first quarterly as well. Yep. So even my boot camp, even my trainer boot camp, you mentioned Shannon.
Yep.
Trainer boot camp was in Canberra, and I remember she came to my room and, "Who are you?" Come with me. Yeah. And she walked around. We went in the old hotel we were at, and all the doors were open, and she went, "Come in here." So we went into her room, and I can't remember who she was sharing with. She's like, "Oh, don't worry about them. Have a seat." Yeah. And we had a chat. Yeah. We chatted for about 45 minutes, Yeah. She was just keen to get to know and ask questions. And it was old school Les Mills too back then. It was very old school Les Mills, which a lot of that culture's thankfully gone now. But that was my first introduction to Shannon as well. And she again such a presence, such a presence as a human, let alone
you knew when
she looked at things.
You knew when Shannon was around. You knew not only from her looks, but you could just tell the energy. Shannon walked into a room, and Shannon was there. Yeah,
Shannon was in the house. Yeah, yes,
yeah.
So
totally.
Great times. Great times knocking around at boot camp and at first modules and at first quarterlies. That whole process, what it did for me was give me belief in myself.
Yep.
And me being me, it was straight away. I'm like, so what's next? What's next? And it wasn't, because I was never the person who went, how do I become a trainer presenter? Yep. What have I got to do to get on the team? It was never about that. It was, tell me what the good people do and I'll do it.
Yep.
It wasn't tell me what I've got to do and I'll do it. Yep. It was, and it was about being a sponge at every opportunity at that higher level when you're hanging around with Meg and at quarterlies and taking all of it in and then turning it into your own thing. My biggest advice for instructors always, and again, I've said this verbatim over the years, but we are in an industry where using other people's words is okay. Using cues and coaching that you hear or are involved with, it's okay, but you have to make it your own. You've got to give it your own twist.
Yep.
And I've always thought you have to give it your own interpretation.
Yeah.
And it is because a release is a story.
Yes.
A release is a story of fitness. Glenn comes up with pump 100. It's a story, start to finish.
Yep.
You need to watch it and learn it.
Yep.
You need to interpret it like you would reading a book.
Yes.
And then you deliver your version of it. You follow the bouncing ball, but then your flavor comes over the top. And that's how you turn generic coaching into authentic language.
Yes. Yeah.
That you own.
Totally.
And that for me, mate, is what I was really good at. Yep. That's what I was really, really good at. And I knew it. And it also didn't I never rested on my laurels. I also always wanted to explore it further.
Yes.
And it became, the further I got into my career, it was less about the words that we used in Les Mills and more about the words we used in between those words. It was all about the shit that joined the coaching language together that made me really good at what I did. Because I put so much fucking time and energy into getting good at it, you know, and it's something I say proudly, because if you want to be good at something, you've got to work hard at it. You have to.
Yeah.
You just have to.
Yeah.
You know?
You
just have to. So
this is the Group X podcast. So how did the opportunity come up to get on a video?
What release was it? They came to Sydney for another Filex, and we had the bike room upstairs in one of the halls. It was upstairs in a glass pavilion, in a glass there on a glass mezzanine. And it was 43 RPM 43. It was the next year, so it was only the next year. And I got the mic for a couple of songs, and I had track 5, Voodoo People, Magic People.
Oh wow,
Voodoo People.
Yeah.
So I had 2 tracks, and that was one of them. And I took, there were 3 classes, and there were only 4 bikes on stage. So it was Glenn and Sarah. I did one with the Storm. I did one with Alani. So I got to teach with Alani, which was a big deal. And I think Paul Pierce was in another one back in the day. Paul Pierce was one of my first modules. I co-did a module with as a trainer in Melbourne, and I loved Paul. He was like, we just clicked, and he was such a great mentor for me on the road. But I ripped it to bits, mate. I ripped it. I remember George Tonga being up the back, and he'd started to get back on the team by that time. He'd been back in the team. As I said, George was a participant of mine back in Park Street. For the history, George used to be on the UK trainer team back in the day when he lived in London. And his journey back to being on the trainer team. And I remember him up the back, and I remember his jaw hitting the ground at what I was doing, and I could tell it was a good jaw thing. And I remember Glenn saying something to me under his breath on stage while I'm rolling out the track. And it just really worked. And after class, Glenn just went, I just remember Glenn going, you've got some really good stuff happening, without being specific. He just said, you've got some really good stuff happening. And I knew that was, to me, that was an endorsement more than a recognition. That was an endorsement of where I was at. And it showed opportunity. I knew that was going to stimulate chat with Meg and with the team. And that was cool. That was really cool, you know. So it was, what was it? You know, that was 43. 47 was the next Filex a year later. And I was on the stage again and pretty prominent on the team by that time. And as a trainer, I was becoming pretty prolific. I trained a lot of people really quickly. And I started asking questions of LM about, like, I wanted data from how my training was going. It's like, okay, so I'm training all these people. How many of them are getting certified? How many of them are actually doing it? You know, I wanted all the numbers, because I wanted to know if what I was doing
was landing, and
I wanted it to be measured.
I
wanted it to be measured. I'm training all these people. I was working every second weekend and absolutely scouring the country, around the country, doing initial module training for RPM in 2 days. I wanted to know what the outcome was. And when the data came in, to give myself a pat on the back, I was at least 10% above anyone else on the team for certifications. More of my people were going and getting certified
then,
and more of them were passing. Now, to me, the number still could be improved, but that was my trainer head. You know, that was me becoming a trainer and going, quantify what I'm doing, measure what I'm doing, so we can all make it better. You know. That then led into more stuff. I went over to, I guess the thing before that is I actually, I went to New Zealand for RPM 43. I was over for the filming. I met Dallas Blacklaw in New Zealand. I met Dallas in New Zealand in the studio. So that was my first opportunity to be involved and see a filming. Was part of it as well, you know, make the shift over. So 47 comes along and it's released, and we do our thing in Australia, and we do our quarterlies and everything's going. And then I got the call up, I think after 47 for 49. For 49, the opportunity to do it. And I prepared, bro. I I was because I was still racing. I was still riding my road bike. I was a competitive cyclist around Sydney. I was in summertime. We were racing probably 2 to 3 nights a week in Penrith or Maroubra or Lidcombe. You know, so I was fit. So I was really authentic, and that's where RPM was at the time. You know, RPM was in that cycling space. You know, Glenn and Dan were involved, and not that it was about being a Lance Armstrong of the day, but it was very much an indoor cycling program. You know, so I was fitting the bill, I guess. And I was also doing something quite different. The way I was delivering content, the way I was coaching, what I was saying, the way I was writing, everything was really visual. Everything was really what was known RPM to be, but I was just doing it differently. And what I was doing differently was engaging people. They were going, fuck, I like what he does. I like how he rides. I like what he says. You know, I like the way he says it. And
different to what we'd seen before.
It was different to what we'd seen before. And we'll talk about, I know we'll get into this, but I got over to the filming and I had, and Chris Hutton was doing Step. It was his first filming as well. And we shared a room. So that was an amazing journey because, you know, Chris and I were teammates, but we were never close in that regards as even as teammates, but it was great to share that journey with him at the same time. I really did.
Excellent.
I really did enjoy that moment.
I'm reaching out to Chris to try and get him to come on the show. So I'm just waiting to hear back.
Chris has forgotten more than we'd fucking know, mate. You know, he's he's I always had an utmost respect for Chris. I really enjoyed talking to him when we got the opportunity to talk. He was harder as a GFM. I remember I let him down once for a module. I couldn't find a cover in time and I couldn't get in contact with him. I had to jump on a plane to go to Tasmania. And it wasn't until I landed in Tassie that we had a chat. I remember he had the shits with me big time and I really couldn't do much. I was but I remember feeling so bad that I had to get on this plane and I didn't have it resolved. So I'm sorry, mate. I'm sorry, Chris. I do remember it. It's never happened again. You know, so I mean, even that's my respect for the GFMs, you know, and the roles that they had and how hard it can be at times. But so that was really cool. But what I loved, it did land with me after the filming. But it also something that really did resonate with me going forward. Our filming of RPM 49 was off the hook. We had Philip in the room, Jackie was in the room. And I didn't know at the time that wasn't normal to me. Okay, so this is what they do. Everyone's here, you know, and generally most were there. You know,
was that in the small studio?
In the small studio, in the small cycle space. We had one tiny break of a track 4 where there was a slight mic issue for Sarah, and we had to stop about a minute into 4, and then we started again, and that was it. So basically, no different than a class. Right. And I just thought that's how it was. Like, I mean, I was there for 43 and I remember more breaks or issues or retakes and stuff like that. But we just rolled out a fucking class. And I remember Philip walked up to Glenn after the class 4 or 5 minutes after, when things started to settle and people had started to leave, and said something to him. I remember Glenn coming to me and going, Basil's so happy. He's like, that's the best RP filming we've ever had. That's the best filming. Basically the words were, that's the best filming we've ever had.
That's excellent.
And I'm like, oh, cool. That's really cool to finish. That's really cool to hear. And Glenn's like, no, that doesn't happen. You know, the feedback in the moment was that everything was just so real. And I was part of that, mate. You know.
Well done. So that's fucking great to hear.
I knew I had a part of it. I knew I was a part of it, you know. I just knew I was a part of it. And it was, you know, it was everything that I'd learned from Dan and Glenn and Sarah and Meg and Kylie and all that stuff, you know, coming together was my opportunity. And I fucking grabbed it with both hands and wrung its neck. You know, I wrung its neck. As luck would have it, because as good as what I did and I knew I'd made a mark, the only reason I got on the next one, being 51, was because Glenn had broken his foot, fallen off a balcony on a New Year's Eve party, from what I can understand. That might be not true. I'm not sure. But he did break his foot. That was true. But anyway, I got a call up in the January to go, can you come over? And if I was fit at 49, I was fit in January over the summer season. I had the bike rider tan on the arms and the black legs and the super tan, you know, skinny as. And ripped it apart again. But that was the release where I was sitting down with Glenn in one of the studios at Les Mills HQ, and we just spoke about everything for a few hours. We were meant to be in there doing a rehearsal about something, a stretch. We wanted to talk about the end of class. We didn't do that. We basically just talked about it, and he wanted to know my philosophies. He wanted to know my thinking and the way I did things. And we said this before about I was saying things differently. We had that exact chat, Glenn and I. He goes, mate, you just say things differently. And I went, bro, I say the same fucking words you say.
Yep.
I just say them a different way. We all have coaching language that's Les Mills.
Yes.
I said, number one, I say everything with absolute belief in what I'm saying. I don't just deliver a cue.
Yeah.
I coach.
Yep.
So I believe that my first line in track one is a coaching cue.
Yes.
So my mindset comes into play.
Yep.
Warm up is your first opportunity to connect with the room in front of you. So what you say is arguably more important than track 3.
Yes. Yeah.
Or track 5 or track 7. It's arguably the most important part of a class is the first delivery of anything that you say that gets them moving in a fitness workout is how I say that. You know what? Track 1, it should be pretty easy.
Yeah. Yep.
Then why is it so hard?
Yeah.
Why is it so hard for instructors to deliver warm-ups?
Yep.
I say all this on purpose, knowing that there's a conversation there to be had. But so you're getting an insight there with the passion in my voice about how much I got excited by that.
Yeah.
That simple little nerdy detail for me.
How different?
Was something I put so much energy into.
How different is it teaching a video to teaching a normal class? Because I'm going to say some of the other podcasts that I've heard and some of the other interviews that I've heard from other presenters that have been and done, I could keep calling them DVDs, but done videos, that process and that week leading up to it when they've got your 7 or 8 days, or it used to be 7 or 8 days, I don't know if it still is, but that whole process of it's very different to teach a video and an educational video compared to a normal class you teach on a Monday 5:30 or a Monday lunchtime class at Market Street, as an example.
Look, I guess as I said there, when we filmed 49, I didn't know any different other than the small experience I'd had being over for one at 43 as a spectator. But the aim is to make them as at the time, and they evolved over my time too. They evolved quite a lot as virtual came around. So I was there for the change, I was there in the middle of it for the change. And RPM was the program where virtual was trialed.
Yes.
That was the program.
Yeah.
So the aim was to make it as class-like as possible, understanding there were certain objectives you had to hit. There were certain tasks that you had to deliver.
Yeah.
And they weren't something you might or might not say in a class that you might have plans for. This is something you had to hit.
Yeah.
You really had to hit it. So when I started my filming journey, we were doing 2 classes a day for 7 days and 1 day off before.
Yeah.
But the time I'd finished my journey, I might have been lucky to do 4 classes in a week.
Yeah.
Because I didn't need it.
Yeah.
Because you're so good at what you do and you know the process so well, and you come in armed with so much, and other parts of the process were different where we were getting music and stuff before we'd come over.
Yeah. Yeah.
It changed it really did change a lot. But for me, the aim was to always make it as class-like as possible for the benefit of the instructor learning tool.
Yes.
My want was to deliver at least one thing in every filming that was brand new to every instructor. That was my goal. Most of it will be familiar, but there'll be one little nugget where you go, fuck yeah. That was my motivator. And I shared that openly with Sarah and Glenn and Jackie and all the time. And they were like, that's what we want. That's how programs evolve.
Yes.
It's too easy to get stale and just say the same thing all the time and have different music.
Yeah.
And that's a really simplistic way of looking at it. But there are times in most programs where a lot of instructors would go, it was pretty fucking boring for a year, because it can become a bit mundane.
Yeah.
If you're a one-time instructor who gets the opportunity to go and do one DVD, you only get one shot and you have to make your mark.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to get a second opportunity off the back of a misfortune. And I did something different again. I might have been on the radar for something more anyway, but I got that opportunity.
Yes. Yeah.
The thing that most don't know about that journey for me is that I was as passionate about the training side as I was about at an LMI level as I was at an LMAP level about training instructors. And I wanted to travel for Les Mills International around the world and teach other instructors or other teams how to teach instructors.
Yeah.
That for me, mate, that was as big a deal, not just because we got to travel, just because it meant new people, different ideas, different mindsets, different cultures. How will that evolve my RPM? I'd like to think that my RPM by the end of my time was influenced by every place I visited and by every person I'd met, rode for, rode with, rode in front of, trained with, supported, you know, and even other programming, you know, the other programming. I had the ability to coach RPM for a while. I was over there as a coach during filming, where I was on stage or behind the scenes.
Wow.
I loved that shit. You know, the development of people for me was people in your class as an instructor. And I've said openly, I was always an instructor first, because that paid most of my bills. You know, I was an instructor first. I was at the coalface becoming a tradesperson, you know. I was probably a trainer second, because that was the second biggest income stream. You know, and it was at least once a month, maybe a couple of times a month. And then third was a presenter. Because it was once every 3 months or maybe once every 6 months at LMI. So I thought that I prioritized it in the right way for the right reasons for me. And then when those opportunities came to do something overseas, or when workshops came up in Australia, mate, I was definitely both feet into everything, jumping and stomping and not being able to wait, you know. Because for me, it was always about development, how to get better, how do we improve the people so that their people have a better experience. You know, how do we get better at doing this personally? And even now with my role on the other side of the business, you know, I'm constantly have conversations, and I've learnt, and it's not through frustration, it's just the understanding that these things take time, is that the development of a team, the development of an instructor, it really should start with the instructor. So I'm, you know, talking to instructors out there, you need to start developing yourself in order to improve. And it needs to be, if you're a Les Mills instructor, you need to do some Les Mills upskill. It happens every 3 months with a quarterly, but there's other opportunity. But you know what? Some of the biggest development I've had, Tony, has not been through Les Mills. You know, I've had the privilege of spending time with an acting coach, with a voice coach, you know, that's outside that realm, and that extracurricular stuff made me a better Les Miller.
It's those skills that you can bring in that you can use in what you're doing when you're teaching.
Totally, absolutely correct. And you know what? Some great influences on me were things like, and I don't want to talk out of turn. I hope not. Might have dust, but Dallas. You know, Dallas tried to get on the team once, and he was unsuccessful. And we got in contact because we'd met. We got in contact and we helped each other. But I helped him and said, "Man, I think this is what you've got to do." And he fucking knuckled down and did it all. And he got on the team. You know, he didn't see it as a setback. He saw it as an opportunity to develop. It was all about his mindset and the support that he got. Another example is Sammy Winter from Melbourne. You know, Sammy he was on the presenter team and it couldn't quite get on. Him, the little bugger, on his own back, went and got voice coach lessons and acting lessons. I was running the team at the time. We'd talk after every appointment that he'd had. And I was like, man, can I harvest this shit?
Awesome.
And I said, with permission, can I share some of this with the RPM team? And he was like, of course. So what Sam was going through in order to develop himself to become a better trainer eventually was actually information that was helping the current trainer and presenter team, not only in RPM, but at the time I'd also launched Sprint for Les Mills in a couple of places around the world, and it helped set up the team here in Australia to establish Sprint as a program. That was influencing that and hadn't even been started yet. So development can come from amazing places, you know? And that was like Sammy punching up. He was punching up. I was the conduit, you know? It was awesome, mate. It was so amazing. So I say again to the instructors out there, it starts with you making that conscious effort to go, I want to become better at this for whatever reason. And there's a multitude of reasons, but it starts with you. And you know what the next step is, Tony? It's clubs recognizing the need for this and clubs starting to put their hands in their own fucking pockets and going, hey, team, we want to help. We want to invest in you. We want you to become better.
Yeah.
What is it that you need? We're here with support for time, resources, and even some money.
Yep.
You know, clubs that do that are the ones that are going to win in group fitness.
It's funny you say that. There was a post put up on social media this week that was a hypothetical question that was posed around, what if your landlord gave you $2,000 a month off your rent, due to COVID and all that kind of stuff? What would you guys invest it in? And I was reading these things of, we'd invested into more membership consultants, or we'd put it over there in the rent fund to try and help pay rent more, and blah blah blah. And I just piped up, and my response was, I'd invest it back into the biggest retention tool we've got, being group fitness. Oh, what do you mean, like live or virtual? It's like, I didn't respond, because I was like, if you don't get it, I'm not going to respond to you again. But if you're not putting money into group fitness, and now I don't mean investing that into your group fitness manager. I don't just mean investing that back into paying your license fees. I mean looking at your group fitness as a whole and throwing that into group fitness. Yeah. And as you just said, then it could be different style of training and coaching for your instructor base. It could be looking at different software platforms to make the job of a group fitness manager easier. It could be anything that's in there, but reinvest it in there. You've got to invest in your team, because, as I said, the biggest retention tool you have in your gym is group fitness. How many people per hour when a class is on are you servicing, compared to that treadmill that you purchased over there, or that lat pull-down machine, or that piece of other equipment that you purchased? How much does that cost you? How much is group fitness costing? Yes, group fitness is an expense. It's an ongoing expense. It's a cost center. But at the same time, how many people are you servicing? Yeah. Stop wasting money on sales membership consultants and halve them. Put the money you're doing into that into your group fitness, and watch group fitness do it for you.
It's been amazing for me in the partnership manager role for the last 2.5 years now, to realize how many businesses don't give a department that much energy, where even as an average, probably 1 in every 3 people who walk into their group fitness spaces. 25-30% is sort of average swipage for group fitness in Australia, and the good ones are hitting 50, and the really good ones are kicking it out of the park. It's amazing to me how much energy doesn't get given with a GFM who basically has an admin role on limited hours per week. It becomes hard for them.
I'm getting you on the series that I do, group fitness management. You know that for sure. You're coming on and we're having a chat. I'm passionate about GFM stuff, and that's Group X managers are. That whole topic. I could talk to you for hours around that, because there's so much on that I think we could delve into.
The segue here, mate. The segue is that it's about development and a business giving development the energy it deserves. You know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's got to have instructors have got to look what they're doing and look at themselves, and not just, I suppose, as I'm going to say, a lot of clubs were, before I stepped sideways out of teaching and not teaching anymore, I noticed a lot of clubs were not investing in their instructors. Instructors, it's up to you. You've got to go and do it. And so instructors are like, well, I don't know how, so I'm not going to. No, it's too hard. I'm not going to worry about it. And that's where a change needs to happen out there. And I think we'd bring it back to where you were before with the when you were doing your video, your presentation stuff, and getting it back to the instructors. It's key. That's vital. That's the change that I think we needed to see. And I think I'm glad that we did see it as well in the industry and in what you were doing with the releases, where it's not, yes, it's an educational release for the instructors. Yep. And the way that it's being taught is to instructors. But as you're saying, it's the same way that you would teach to a class. Yeah. So that the person is having the same experience, whether they're an instructor or whether they are just a participant hanging in for a ride. Going in. It's
absolutely
interesting to see that is, as I said, and from some of the other podcasts that I've listened to recently, how I suppose it's probably different programs. Different programs have different needs with that kind of stuff. You mentioned about teaching when it changed from being an educational to the releases started looking at virtual. Was there a change in the way that you had to teach? Is there a different style of teaching compared to the educational release we were so used to, than to a virtual release, which was going to the public?
Not for me personally, I guess, because by the time things started to change, for a couple of releases, we'd had cameras with sort of blankets over them in the cycle studio, excuse me, as we recorded. And we knew what that was for. That was testing virtual and how it might look, how it might sound. And that was all cool. But when they built upstairs into the new studio on the roof, and the new studio one was created, eventually filming went up there. And the biggest difference was you went from being in an authentic cycling studio that was very similar to the normal Auckland studio. The only difference was the front row of bikes were basically not in place.
Yep.
So they removed a certain number of the bikes out of the room for filming. So equipment could be put in and lighting could be put in.
Yes.
So you went upstairs where you were on a high stage that was probably a meter off the ground, and you were 10 meters away from a front row. It was very unauthentic in the cycle space. Yep. So that became a real consciousness that you had to do things to the people in front of you for the motivation you need as an instructor feeding from a crowd, while also engaging with cameras on purpose.
Yes. Yep.
So we started to become, that acting skill started to come in a lot more.
Yep.
And they wanted more of the authenticity than they wanted the acting.
Yep.
It was still about being who you were and that sort of thing. But there were definitely a consciousness around what camera's got the red light on, and if you've got certain things to say, look for that camera, because that might be used. So that did start to creep in. But I don't think it just became a different, same energy. That makes sense. When you're riding with the peeps in front of you, it was still awesome. It was still awesome. We did the special edition virtual that we did, which was never released to instructors. It was only ever on the virtual platform, was the first virtual filming of any program. And that was done in a studio where we couldn't even see the crowd. We just knew there were 20 people in front of us, but you couldn't actually see them. They were completely blacked out. So that was almost like just teaching to camera. That was pretty much just teaching to camera. So that was different again, So it always evolved, mate. It always evolved. It was always a challenge. The biggest challenge was probably the first, because I transitioned through all that. I never really found too much of a struggle with any of it. It was probably harder for the first timer to come and do their first video while that transition was happening, because they were plonked in something that was so foreign to what they were doing at home. So you had to offer a lot of support to your teammates who are in from overseas. And sometimes English second language was a bit of a challenge, or it was just so foreign to them. That was always a little bit harder. But we worked through it. We worked through it, and I loved that whole process.
This is the Group X podcast. The last release that I was a download was 61. How much has it changed since then? I haven't ridden since then. I haven't taught since release 61. What release are we on now? I don't even know for RPM.
I think 93. I mean, I finished on 79. On 79. So it's a while ago. It's a while ago.
It's changed obviously a lot since then, and there's a lot of still a lot of talk on social media and forums. You see almost after every release that comes out is what they've focused on the home user stuff. They haven't focused. It seems to have gone from the educational stuff. It's really changed. Do you find that? Do you see that with the releases? Did you see that happen, or is it just instructors that are wanting to reminisce still in the good old days where as a pump class was, you saw participants in the class and you went over for filming to be part of it because you wanted to be part of it. You wanted to be hopefully seen on it or something like that. Where that all seems to have has it changed?
It's definitely changed. So my last filming was 72. I finished up on 79, and there's definitely been a shift. I think, virtual, the on-demand or Les Mills Plus for the home user access, and virtual for in-gym is a legitimate arm of the Les Mills business. It's a massive component. And the challenge for Les Mills as these markets evolved, I think, is you have one product that has to fit each. So that one filming has evolved dramatically over the years to be something where there are cameras that are specifically used only for the at-home user, or cameras that are used for the big screen that will hopefully be in a gym. You know, it's become quite specific. I think for me being in my position and having my history and even where I work now, I understand why the coaching has been really simplified in every program for the purpose predominantly of the home user market. I get why that's happened. I think as instructors, it's understandable that there is a bit, if you were there earlier, there is a little bit of the authenticity of the individual missing. You know, the funny line that gets thrown out, or some of the other stuff that might have happened in the older days or the older environments. I understand people noticing that doesn't exist anymore. I would challenge them and say, you still got to watch every DVD. You've still got to go through the education around every DVD, and you've got to apply all that. And when you interpret the release and you take it back and deliver it to your own people, that should be your flavor of that release. You know what I mean? So I will support what Les Mills do in the way that they're doing it, absolutely, for that reason. But I say at the same time, I can understand why people who've been in the game for quite a while can see that it has changed. Them seeing it in a negative light is absolutely their right. I would link it back to what are you doing to develop yourself? What are you doing to challenge yourself? Are you going to workshops?
I mean, I remember back when I first jumped into the industry in 2002, 2003, living with Andrew Taylor and Vanessa Laporte. I'd walk into the lounge room after being at the gym finish at 9 o'clock doing PT or whatever, and walk in, and these guys would be learning their choreo in the lounge room. And the VHS was going because that's what it was back then. It wasn't DVD releases. It was the old stuff. And it was, in most cases, it was one video camera that was set up in the back of the room to film the class and film the instructors. And that's all it was. You know, when you look at that to where it is now, as you said, it has grown and evolved so much that I believe anyway that it is where it is now is an amazing product. It's got to be an amazing product for what it is and how far it's come. Instructors can't think that it's just going to stay where it was. I mean, if we stayed where we were, if the programs stayed where they were, or the filming and everything stayed how they were, would the programs really have ever developed? Would they have ever gone
they need
anywhere?
to evolve.
Exactly. Like everything has to change. I mean, this is off topic for a second, but I'm going to share this with you. And if Glenn listens to this, then I'm probably going to be in a bit of strife, because I'm sure you'll remember there was a Filex in Sydney where Glenn was there, Sarah was there, and it could have been one of the ones you were on. Probably as you and I were getting to know each other back then. We finished RPM. We'd all walked out. There was a little mobile coffee cart, and we'd lined up there to get a coffee. And Glenn and Sarah were in front of me in the line, and saw that we'd all kitted up in our RPM gear or whatever, and turned around and said, "Oh, guys, what did you think?" And I said, "Mate, I thought it was crap." And I can't remember what release it was, but he didn't like it. He didn't like my honest response at all, and walked off. And Sarah was just left there, and she went, and I went, "Oh, did I say the wrong thing?" And I was like, because it was different from what I was used to with having Mike McSweeney there, and I was only used to Mike. So for seeing Glenn was a change, and I was like, well, I don't like it. I don't like what you've done. And he'd asked the question, so it was just, I probably back then I probably didn't have a filter, so probably I needed to have a filter and say things differently. I'll be a little bit more diplomatic and stuff. And Glenn had obviously come off the stage and was on a high from whatever he's taught and everything. And then Sarah said to me, don't worry, it's, why didn't you like it? And I can't remember what the response was, because I think I sort of went into the whole, oh shit, Tony, what have you just gone and done? He's stormed, you've offended, but yeah, just that moment I'll never ever forget of oh, Tony, what have you've just upset Glenn. Yeah, good one.
Mate.
There's your career limiting move. There it is. Yeah, good one.
Career limiting move.
You're never going to get on stage next to the guy, but still doesn't matter. Look at you, you idiot. What have you done? Oh man,
that is funny, mate. That is funny.
So tell me, how many releases did you do in total?
Oh, sugar.
You need to take your socks
13.
off.
I mean, there was the virtual stuff I did. The virtual stuff, we did 3 releases for the special edition. I was on 2 of them. But we recorded 3 on the day, and we'd practice with each other and everything. That was one of my greatest weeks ever at Auckland, actually, as a RPM story. It's I think 13 all up with the virtual special editions.
Yep.
What I loved about the virtual special edition is I think we'd filmed. I went to Stockholm because there was an opportunity to go to the Body Bike Warehouse in Denmark for the first time, but we went to Stockholm for the big filming over there. And 63 was filmed. We'd filmed 63 just before, and then we're going to Stockholm 62. Stockholm was 62.
Yep.
Filming was Stockholm in 62. Right, cool. That's right. That's what it was. And then so 61 was the workshop that we had at Stockholm. Or it might have even been 60. It might have even been 60. It might have been 2 releases before the filming, because I know things are a bit different. So we did RPM outdoors, and Chris Richardson was there, and Carl McCartney was there, and we had a lot of the heavy hitters were in town. You know, if you weren't on the on stage, because there was the obviously the team that was on stage. There was all country people. Wasn't there?
Yes.
I wasn't on stage. It was Glenn and the team, the local team.
Yep.
Anyway, we came back and we got asked to come to Auckland. Myself and Carl McCartney got asked to go to Auckland to do some special edition filming for virtual. And we got there, and it was completely off schedule stuff in regards to normal quarterlies. Yeah. I remember we walked in, we both got there within the same sort of time. We went in to do one of Glenn's, I don't want to talk out of turn too much, but back then after a filming was done, you know, the process begins straight away for the next one, for what's happening in the future of a program.
Yeah.
And I remember Jackie and Bryce were in the room, and Glenn was doing some outlandish shit on the bike, like Soul Cycle type stuff, you know, and it's him pushing the boundaries.
Yeah.
It's just because you push the boundaries, and that's how you evolve. You force evolution to a degree by pushing boundaries, and people go, that just doesn't work. But you know what? There was a part of that did. That was awesome. Yeah. The process was amazing.
Yeah.
Carl and I had never known that that's what it was like. So that was a massive eye opener.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then the whole week around it was spent basically riding in front of Jackie and Philip in just one of the studios at LMI. And that week we had an acting coach for the whole week, that we had at least a session a day, sometimes 2 sessions a day. And Philip questioned everything about RPM. He questioned everything. And that weekend, we changed language in RPM forever. Yep. We changed the hand position names. We went to medium pace. We changed the feel of it, because what we wanted to do was simplify it for a virtual audience.
Yep.
So that's why I'm so supportive of the fact that things are different in filmings, because being there at the start of it, I could understand the reasons.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, by making things simpler doesn't take away from it. As an instructor, you've just got to fucking add more to it when you get the opportunity, you know?
Yeah.
It was as simple as that. And I can tell you, mate, that one of the filmings that we did, the special filmings that we did, I rolled out the track 1, and I stuffed up the start 4 or 5 times, and I wasn't panicked, because I knew that the language was there. I knew it was going to come.
Yep.
And I can remember how good the track 1 was, and I can remember the track 2 going off so much that I could hear Jackie screaming from 50 meters away. You know, and there was no one in the studio. There was other than the people in front of us.
Yeah.
We couldn't see.
Yeah.
The people on the, you know, the techie side of it was going off, and this big shed that was all in black. It was a filming studio.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just remember how big it was. And I remember for me going, I fucking got it, because that was me going, I'm going to make this happen at that moment. I'm going to have this happen here.
Yeah.
I want this feeling. And I'm talking about the transition of a hand position.
Yep.
I had a goal.
Yep.
You know, my skill level had got to that point where it wasn't about what I was going to do in that song or even that block. It was what I was going to do with that move.
Yep.
You know, you get to that finite place, and I was so confident that I would get it, and it fucking worked, you know, and it takes you to that place where I started to later in my career go, we never say the word perfect enough in a class, or as an instructor, we never go, that class was perfect or that track was perfect. We never, it's like it was always unachievable. Group fitness, we're so hard on ourselves.
Yep.
And for me, it was a moment where I went, you know what, that was fucking perfect.
Yeah.
That was fucking, I could not have done that any better. I couldn't do it again now and do it different. I couldn't do it as good as that. You know, that was perfect. So any inconsistency, anything that wasn't done, it doesn't matter, because overall it was just rock and roll.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And even that was a moment for me that influenced the way I would train people. It would influence the way I would talk and mentor people.
Yeah.
You know, it would influence so much of my senior life as a Les Mills instructor. I'd come back and at Clubland and look for that was perfect tonight team. That class was fucking perfect.
Yeah.
We knocked it out of the park tonight.
It's a word you don't hear that often. In everyday life, you don't hear that word that often.
We hold it to too high an account for things that don't need to be held to such a high account.
Yeah.
Because let's put it in our space. It's just fucking group fitness. Thank you, Pete Manuel. It's just fucking group fitness.
Yeah.
You know, sky's not going to fall.
Yeah.
You know, Emma Barry, I don't know how many times I had chats with Emma and she'd melt my brain with things. And she's just like, fuck it, whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Just do it. Have fun.
Yeah.
Just have fun.
Yeah.
You know, no one remembers the great coaching cue. They remember how you fucking made them feel.
Yeah.
You know?
That's right there. That's the bomb. That's that gold. That's that nugget. You go, yes. They're not going to remember the coaching cue. They're going to remember how you made them feel.
Yep. And you know what? That to me is completely 100% absolutely relevant, valid, and all instructors should have that embedded in their head.
Yeah.
Now, if I flip to my Lee the talking in third person, Les Mills, you know, DVD presenter or trainer brain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the trainer brain. The reason I would put so much focus into a hand movement and exactly what I said at that time is because I also believed what I say helps influence the way that they feel.
Yep. Yep.
Right. So that's how I took it to a whole other level.
Yeah.
That was me. That's me at that level, you know, taking it to that place and making it about the specific language in the specific moment at the specific point.
Yeah.
I truly believed when I was doing it that influences the feeling.
Yeah.
You know, so they might not remember the actual coaching word, but the fucking coaching added to it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's how it went to that next level, you know, that different place, you know. And I loved sharing that stuff.
There's a word you've said quite a fair bit tonight, which resonates with me more than ever. It's authenticity. Yep.
Yeah.
When I think of you on releases, presenting classes, when I think of you back in Sydney teaching classes, that word resonates big time. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's yeah. I've lost words, but only because it's trying to describe. It to me, it's not something you can describe. It's a word that has got so much meaning behind it. But if I put it into try and wrap it into what you're saying, instructors need to be 100% authentic to themselves, authentic to what they're doing, but authentic to the moment that they're in. Yeah, and which is where I compass authenticity, and what you've sort of said tonight is that if an instructor wants to be a trainer, presenter, if an instructor wants to be the best they can be, they just need to be authentic. They need to be them. Yep. Stop trying to be someone else. I mean, I'll take you on an example for a second that baffled me big time. When listeners know, and as you know as well, I used to work at Les Mills head office and do what you're doing for WA. I did it for New South Wales and for WA. And there were clubs that I remember walking into one club. It was in regional New South Wales. I won't say exactly where, so I don't want to embarrass the club or the instructor. But I walked in and I watched the last 2 tracks of a pump release. Yep. And I was like, wow, great. It was good to see a class being taught. It was packed. It was fantastic. Class finished, and I went and had a chat to the group fitness manager and the owner of the gym. And then so be it that instructor managed to walk into the room at the same time. And the club said, the owner and the GFM said to me, "Oh, Tony, what did you think of our instructor?" And I said, it was great. It was really, really good. I said, though, but I've got to ask you a question. Why did you say what you said in the language that you said it in? Said, what do you mean? And I said, well, that wasn't English. She said, no, well, that was what was on the DVD.
Yeah.
And I just looked with the same face that I looked at you down just now. So we're doing this on Zoom, and there was a complete well, that's what we're meant to do.
Yeah.
And I said, no, you're not meant to do that. I said, you're meant to coach. You're meant to follow what they're saying, but you don't need to say verbatim what they've said on the education release. I said, because that's not you. I said, that person that taught that track is from another country, and they were up on stage teaching from that country, and so they were connecting with the participants they had in their class, as in they knew they had their supporters, whatever, come from their country along to filming. But that's not. No one in your class, I'm assuming, but no one in your class would have known what the hell you just said, let alone you probably didn't know what you just said. And I said, that's when that's to me, that's not authentic. That's the authenticity being removed and parrot brought in. I'm just going to regurgitate here what it is. And that's where I think some instructors get exceptionally lazy in, no, guys, no, that's not what we're in this for. Yeah, be you, be authentic, learn from it, but don't regurgitate it word for word verbatim, because it just doesn't land. Doesn't land at all.
No, it doesn't land.
The class was good. Don't get me wrong, the class was good, but I'm going to say as well that it was a peak time slot, and you know.
Yep. Understand. Totally understand. I think for me, well, I don't think I actually know. I know where I sit in regards to what makes things, what gives things the ability to be authentic.
Yep.
And it's a simple thing. It's actually I find it easy to frame, and it's about belief. You've got to believe in what you're saying.
Yeah.
You've got to believe what you're saying. Yeah. So, and you can take it a step further, get a little technical and go, you've got to understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how you take it to another level. So you can be a great connector and believe in the program and love the essence and get up there and body jam the shit out of it, but you might be a really shit coach.
Yep.
Or not a strong coach. Let me say it that way, not a strong coach.
Yep.
But when you understand what you're saying, you then become a coach.
Yeah.
Because when you have belief in your coaching language, it lands with more depth. Yeah, the arrow goes deeper in. That you get penetration of words.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's the difference. It is the difference between cueing and coaching.
Yep.
Coaching is an understanding of the information that you're giving forward for the purpose of having the people in front of you apply that information and get a result from it, rather than just delivering a cue that points them in a direction. It's easy to get techie and nerdy with that stuff, but the difference between good instructors and great instructors, I find generally, you can take the talent away, you can take the energy, you can take the talent out of it, because everyone's talented at a point. Everyone has a talent for it, because they get up on stage and they have a timing ability, and they have an ability to learn choreography and deliver a safe, effective class. But the great ones out there have a great understanding of themselves.
Yep.
So what am I good at? What do I need to work on? They have a really good belief, an understanding of the essence of what they're teaching, whatever the program is. They understand what the program's about, and they believe in what they're doing.
Yeah.
Those things combined give you the best opportunity to be yourself. To be authentic. To be authentic. So mate, it's a cool word, and I appreciate it. I sort of said to you earlier on in our chat, when I was with Glenn in New Zealand talking, and he said, you just do things differently. And I said, I say the same shit you do.
Yeah.
I believe in everything that comes out of my mouth. That's, to me, sort of is my short summary of what authenticity is. Belief.
Yeah. Now, look, I was going to ask you two last questions before we wrap up, and you've just answered one of them, because it was going to be what advice would you give an instructor? And you've nailed it. If you were to sum it all up, to me, it's more get out there and bloody be authentic. Yeah, it's as brutal as that may sound, but it's be you, and that's, I appreciate that. So that was that question. I said the last one though is I want to know, and it's what does the future hold for Lee Smith?
Oh, geez, mate, bloody hell. I bleed Les Mills. I really do. I have such a belief in what, as a company, as a broad look at the company, as a company that creates fitness workouts, life-changing fitness experiences, for the betterment of anyone who touches Les Mills should come out of it the other side somewhat better. And I think overwhelmingly that happens. I do think overwhelmingly that happens. as you know, there's a business that's attached to a Les Mills life, and it was started. Body Bike was started off the back of the Les Mills connection.
Yep.
And it's something that, the business side of life is directly connected to the brand, as well as probably more so in the early days than group fitness itself. It was connected specifically to RPM as such a strong program in Australia at the time. And there was also an endorsement from Les Mills at the time too. So that sort of really resonated. I think for me personally, it's to, I don't know. I've probably got my head more about what's in the future for me personally at the moment. Family life has taken a bit more of a front seat as we're trying to sell a house and look at sort of doing something else for family. For the business, I know the business is in really good hands. I know there's work to do for the business, but I know that the business is in a good place, and the future that I'm gobsmacked, mate, with the Body Bike hat fair and square on, that we've gobsmacked at the way in which we've got through the challenges of the last couple of years. I'm mind blown that we were so lucky to have a product that was relevant. When you sit back and think about how many other in the Les Mills role, that I choose to do, and I'll be open and honest, I did the role and I told them probably 4 years, because I wanted to get behind the scenes and get on the other side of the fence and learn about the industry from that side of the fence. Maybe for something down the line, over here in WA, I love the idea of being involved in maybe in a gym or maybe a franchise or something. And I don't think there's anything wrong with learning that skill set, or a lot of that required skill set with Les Mills Asia Pacific. I think that's a really powerful. I give myself a pat on the back and say I could have done worse things.
Totally. I look at my 5 years there as I learnt a shitload, and I use that stuff every single day. The people that I met, for starters, the relationships that I have, but that skill set of understanding the back end of how a gym operates is so different to what you usually see as just an instructor or just as a group fitness manager. There is a truckload more that goes on. So I totally get that, and I respect you saying that as well. I think it's a valid point.
If I talk about what's for me at the moment, I've been in a big reflecting place probably the last 12 months. I've had the ability, and it's chats like this where I get to step back over the fence in memories lane for the other side of my Les Mills life. And I love the fact that I have that ability now, that I've got 3 years almost of the business side of the business side of LM, and then there's Body Bike sitting there and all my history on the other side of the fence. I know that's a rare thing. AT's had the ability to do it. There's very few people who've been on both sides of the fence. Very few. And that's a privilege and a lucky thing and a really cool thing to have done or to be doing. But I think of the amount of amazing people on the Australian TAP team that I had the pleasure of working with, working under and even managing, helping mentor and helping develop. I loved my time leading RPM. I loved my time developing Sprint and all the wonderful people that came along with that. The emails that I would send, and who was the automatic emailer, who was the quick emailer, who was the dismissive emailer, when it came time to dishing out tracks for workshops and quarterlies, who'd put their hand up and ask for a track, whereas others who'd go, I'll do whatever you give me. Like, I loved all that stuff. I loved managing the high end. I loved dealing with the personalities. I loved the difference between a trainer and someone who was a presenter only. And I don't mean only a presenter. I loved the fact that they didn't have a head full of trainer stuff. They didn't have trainer brain. Trainers had trainer brain. And presenters didn't. And I would always push the presenters to break rules. Because they're not contaminated with all the training stuff. You know what I mean? I loved that. So I reflect on that. I noticed at the last quarterly that's just halfway through, Steve Wolf from South Australia is finishing up with an LMAP, and Steve was in my boot camp all those years ago. So a big shout out to Steve as he finishes his presenter career for LMAP. Just so many amazing people. And mate, I mean, you and me, rocking up to Fitness First North Sydney and it not being a club open on the weekends, and here's big Tony Z out the front ready to open up. Sometimes 2 modules at once going on. And then coming, Saturdays, Sundays. So many cool memories that I have from all of that. all that influences where I will go next with my life here in Perth with Tina as we move. And I do think all that influences Body Bike, and I do think it will influence whatever we do in our future as well.
Yeah.
You know, I'm so thankful for stumbling across Les Mills. You know, I stumbled across my wife. There's so many things in life that you do that become such a big part of your life that you didn't necessarily go and source. You know what I mean? I'm thankful for my business partner, Paul, who took that chance on that phone call from my shit experience at a Filex. and I went into the expo next door, and I'm like, mate, honestly, Tony, there was a Kaiser and there were 2 other bikes that were both out of China with a different sticker. That was it. You know, that was all I saw. And I'm like, mate, there's opportunity here, you know, without knowing what it was, sort of thing. So, I like to see the people that I get to deal with each day. I like to see them grow. I like to see you evolve. I like to see Maddie evolve. I like to see Paul evolve. We've got from the Les Mills side. I love what I'm going to get to go over, I think in a few weeks for the first time since June last year to catch up with the Les Mills team. And that'll be an opportunity. I love seeing Nathan as one of the owners. You know, I love chatting with Nathan. We've always had a great relationship. And an open, honest chat and funny chats, which can be weird, you know. I can't wait to Vita, who is now in the business team and also on the tap team. He's the next one who has this opportunity for both sides of the fence. And he's doing it concurrently, you know, a bit like AT did. So, mate. I'm just super thankful for the opportunities that I've had, and that what Les Mills has given me an opportunity to do, and in a broader sense, I guess, group fitness. The people that I've met have been overwhelmingly just so much more awesome than not. And I get, you know, it's a feel good place. Fitness is a feel good industry. You know, amazing people always, amazing memories that have been, you know, installed in my I would used to call it a Teledex. Now it's a cloud, you know, sits in my 50-year-old.
As long as it's not dementia, mate. As long as it's not dementia.
Daddy dementia, mate. Daddy dementia. We had a joke about that, but mate. And look, and I do really love the opportunity to talk about this stuff, and I hope that it resonates with instructors.
I'm sure it will, mate.
Club owners and managers and PFMs.
You've got a knowledge that a lot of people don't have. You've got experience that a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to experience, but it also you're able to share it with them, and that's part of me wanting to do this series of trainer and presenter as well. Is you have a following. You'll always have a following. There's people that gelled with you, whether it was because you did a release or because you did their initial module training, or just because they may have met you at a quarterly workshop. You know, and there's that experience that you can pass on to people that I know for sure people will gel and people will understand from this release of this chat.
Mate, I'm an open book, mate. So, I'll share anything. I really will. You know, I'll share anything. It's one person I can't remember where I got it, but it was very much about that. You know, the more good cafes they are on a corner, the better the whole corner goes. You know that. 4 cafes on a cross section across the road from each other, all doing the same thing, slightly different. It becomes a place where people want to go. You know, and I think it's the same with what in group fitness. You know, everyone's sort of teaching the same thing. Do it your way. Do it with your flavor. Do it with your interpretation. Work hard, and you can sort of take it anywhere you want to. You know, you sort of can. You know, there are going to be things that you can't control that get in the way. But if you want to become the best pump instructor in the club, set the fucking goal and work out how to do it. You know, if you want to aim to become a presenter in a program that you teach, Les Mills or otherwise, set the goal and work towards it. Don't just ask questions on how it has to happen. It needs to begin with hard work at the club. You know, you've got to be shit hot in the club before you can be shit hot somewhere else. You know. So it's all that sort of stuff. I love the idea of saying something to someone and having it resonate with them 3 months later, 6 months later. You know, a topic comes up and they go, "Fuck, that Lee Smith said that." You know, I love the idea that happens. And I have a belief that when I talk about things that on occasion it does. You know, I truly believe that it does. So mate. Thank you for the opportunity.
No,
Tony.
mate. Thank you so much for coming on and having a chat to me, mate. I appreciate your time so much. It's not funny, not only with body bike stuff, but also with this and taking time out to have a chat, because I know there's people are going to be listening and get it. So, mate, from me to you.
Yeah, awesome, mate.
Thanks so much.
Can't wait to hear the final product.
Excellent.